If you are trying to create a poetry business, an art business, and that means that you're going to need to have some sort of impact, then one thing that you need to consider becoming is what Daniel Priestley calls a key person of influence, specifically in what he refers to as a micro niche, a very small section of a field. And we're going to talk about 8 new reasons why you want to be considering this point, taken again from Daniel Priestley's Key Person of Influence. Welcome to the Creative Companionship Book Club. This is where we take a look at business texts and apply them to poetry. And to guide you in this process, there is me once more. What's up, guys? My name is Jeff with an O. I am a full poet. And one of the things that, again, you're going to see as we enter this discussion is there's going to be a lot of overlap with the previous books that we've looked at, including Marty Neumeier's Zag and also Chris Stowe's Unbland Yourself. The very first thing that Daniel wants us to really consider, since there's so many tools available now that didn't exist before, we want to consider about the microphone problem. And what this specifically is trying to capture is this idea that the people who benefit most from microphones are not the technicians who create the microphones. The people who benefit the most are the people who use the microphones, the speakers, the singers, whoever is using that microphone to amplify their voice. How can we apply this to ourselves? Well, this means that, for instance, if you're a poet or an artist who's using a tool, for instance, like social media, you can consider social media to be the microphone. This doesn't mean you have to be necessarily an expert in the algorithm or an expert in how the social media platform works. What's important instead is the message. What's important instead is what you're actually saying with the tool. And this is really important because the second point that Daniel mentions is that, in the past, microphones didn't exist. In the past, he looks at industrial age. He looks at, for instance, like factories. Not everyone could afford the factory. Only a select group of people could build the factory. Everyone else was forced to work there. And as you can imagine, the people who owned the factories, they were the ones who had the most power and control over their own desires, over their own income, over the impact that they were able to have on other people's lives, whereas the people who are working in these places had much little. So what we want to be considering as well is that nowadays, everyone owns the factory. If you have a computer, you have the factory. If you have a phone, you have the factory. If you have an idea and you want to share it, there is nothing stopping you from creating what you need. Anyone who's watching this, you can create any poetry business, any art business, really any business that you want now. But you may be wondering, well, where do we go? Because just to be like, okay, I want to make a business around poetry, what does that even look like? Well, Daniel's suggesting that we need to find what he calls, again, a micro niche. So a niche is like a specific field. So for instance, in our case, we're looking at poetry, but it could be like health. It could be food. It could be technology. But you want to go deeper than that. What's like another level more specific? So for instance, I'm looking at in the health field, for instance, maybe you're looking at diet. You can go even further than that, right? A micro niche of the diet industry is, I think of my wife who's on a whole foods plant-based diet. Well, that's very specific. Most people who are on a form of a diet are not doing her diet. So if she wanted to, she doesn't, but if she wanted to, she could really lean into that and talk about that and even perhaps build a business around whole food, plant-based diet information. For poetry, if we look at my communication business, well, yeah, originally I was just teaching pronunciation, but then I narrowed down. It's pronunciation and communication. And then it's narrowed down even further because now it's communication using poetry as a regular device inside of my classes. For diverses, we're not just talking poetry, we're talking about how do you create your own poetry business. So yes, there are craft elements involved, but there's not a lot of people that are actually just talking about poetry and business. So a final example, so some poets I've worked with in the past, they were thinking about, creating their own poetry businesses and some topics that they've set on. For instance, they've decided, okay, I can work on, for instance, like I'm going to create a group around poetry and grief, or I'm going to make a poetry group around poetry and education for kids, like after school programming, things like that. These are things that you can consider for yourself. The reason that these micro niches are really important, again, indirectly referenced in this book and something we talked about before, is Zipf's law, which states that basically if you are the number one in your specific area, then that means you're getting 3 times the opportunities as whoever is number 2. And whoever is in that number 2 spot gets 3 times as many opportunities as whoever is in that number 3 spot. So what we see is that the distribution of opportunity is not even. You have to be ideally in that top position. Maybe you can make a case for being in the second spot, but beneath that, you're just getting so little opportunities. You're not getting the speaking opportunities. You're not getting the job opportunities. You're not getting the the contract opportunity, whatever it may be. You're not going to get them because they're going to the people who are in the top spot. A final note about these micro niches as you're thinking about them, if you need another example, look at, for instance, Facebook, because some of us are going to be thinking about, well, I don't want to go really narrow. I have a lot of different areas of expertise. I know a lot of things. There are a lot of things I want to do. Well, if we look, for instance, at Facebook, Facebook started as just a social networking location, site, platform for people at Harvard students. Then after that, it graduated to college students. And then much further down the line, years later, it opens up to everyone. So we start at the micro, and then as we build there and we outgrow it, then we can add in other micro niches to it. So all I'm asking for is a bit of patience. Pick your one micro area, and then we can expand it later. One of the advantages that David points out here too is that as you pick out these micro niches, our fourth point is that you want to be positioning yourself to really focus on people who are dissatisfied with what's currently offered. I'm dissatisfied with the poetry offerings right now that are related to business. Everyone's talking about, oh, just make art for yourself, or oh, starving artists. You can't make a living off of poetry. I don't ascribe to either of those. I think you can. There's nothing wrong with just making art for you. There's nothing wrong with not creating a poetry business. But what if there is someone who does say, hey, I do want to live on my poetry. I do want to live on my art. What does that look like? Well, there's not really a lot of offerings for you. So that's part of the reason why we're creating diverses. For your own micro niche, who is really dissatisfied with something and what are they dissatisfied about it? And that can be the area that you plug. The good news about this, too, for our fifth point, is that this area that you address isn't most likely going to be something that's completely new to you. It's probably something that you've already developed some sort of expertise in or some sort of knowledge. It's probably an area that you've already helped someone in to some degree. You've already taught them. You've already acted as a guide figure. And so all we need to do is start homing in on that even more and concentrating and telling people about it and focusing on it and building on it. For instance, with poetry, I was already doing things with poetry. I was already getting fellowships. I was already getting publications. I was already getting awards. So this was just a very natural progression. Teaching poetry wasn't something new. And I already had some business expertise just from creating my own communication business. So these aren't completely new things. It's just the merging of them that's new. The sixth point from Daniel is that, as you're picking the micro niche, you want to be thinking about those aspects I just talked about. Think about your story, your personal connection, because the more that you can tap into your story, the more people are going to be able to tap into what you're offering, and they're going to see themselves in it, feel more connected to what you're doing. For instance, for diverses in poetry and the desire to guide poets to creating their own platform, again, the story I always tell. I used to just follow the traditional corporate poetry system, just submit, apply to things. And I had a chapbook that was out at 2 different contests, prestigious ones. It was like the Frost Place Prize and it was the Boat chapbook. And here it was beating out, 1,000 other manuscripts. It was a finalist for both. But what happened? Well, within a 4-month span, it got rejected from both, even though it was a finalist, by the same judge, because it was one judge that was judging both contests. And that made me realize, hey, I'm letting the future of my art be dictated by one person. I don't like that. I want to take control of it. I don't want one person to say, hey, no. And then that means I don't have a book that enters the world. I don't think that's not how I want my art to be represented. And that's part of what led me to create the verses. So what's your own story? What's your own connection to that micro niche that you're building on? Our seventh point is connected to something we mentioned earlier about Zipf's law, is that there's two different circles in whatever the niche category is that we create. There's going to be the inner circle and there's going to be the outer circle. If you stay too general, you don't do the micro niche. So, for instance, in the poetry world very much has an inner circle. Like, for instance, I was looking at the Pulitzer, and one of the graphics we have on our Instagram from a little while ago is the Pulitzer Prize has never been won by, for instance, a self-published author, or like the Nobel Prize for Poetry has never been given to a self-published poet in its history. In this, this is going on over 50 years, right? It's always going to people who are established. Everyone who's won has some sort of connection to MFA programs, PhD programs, academia, or professorships. No one outside of that has won. And in fact, that continues they just released the names for the 2026 Pulitzer, and it's the same idea. Okay, everyone who was either a finalist or who won, again, involved in academia in some sort of way. So if you're outside of that, what that goes to show you is that your chances of entering in are very, very small. Your chances of getting the opportunities that people on the inside are getting are very, very small. And so your job, by selecting a micro niche that allows you to have a greater chance of entering into an inner circle. In Columbus, best poet is probably already claimed by someone else. It's not me. But the best poet focused on business, I'm your guy. No one else in the city is talking about poetry and business the way I am. No one else has a poetry venue. No one else has a channel doing the things I'm doing. So that's the niche. That's the thing. I can be the number one for that category. What's the number one that you can be in? What's that category? You have to find a way to break into that inner circle. The final thing that Daniel leaves us with is he leaves us with questions that he asks to help identify whether or not someone is a key person of influence in their industry. The first question is, what do you do? And that question is a chance for people to explain their pitch. How do they talk about what it is that they do? And we've talked about some sound bites and phrases that you can use to create in past episodes of, for instance, Poet Business Institute. The second question he gives is, what makes you credible? Why should we listen to you? This can be about the books you've published, the journals you're in, the publications you have out, the case studies you've created, the outside references to you that you haven't made about yourself. These are ways that you can build your credibility. The next question he asks is, how do you make money? Are you just selling your time? So, for instance, if you don't work, are you still able to bring in income, or you don't get paid? Do you have things like books out? Do you have some sort of product or offer out? Do you have some sort of service? Do you hire people to do things for you? What are the ways that you're bringing in income for yourself? Do you have an ecosystem? For instance, for my communication business, there are things. So, for instance, there's a textbook, there's a YouTube channel that's bringing in some income. I have video courses that bring in income. I have group coaching, also have one-on-one offerings. Those are my main services. For the verses, it's a mixture of workshops, it's a mixture of books I've written, and then it's a mixture of the coaching opportunities and things like that. The next question that Daniel asks is, what does the internet say about you? Easiest way to do this, if we Google you, what's going to come up? Maybe if you're a poet, like if you're watching this, most likely you're an artist, most likely we're going to see some of your publications. But what else? Is there some original thought that you have going? Are there some essays out there? Is there a book you've written? Is there an article that was written about you? Are people talking about you? What can we find online? And how much time can we spend with you online? For instance, for my YouTube channels, between my communication business and diverses, there's about 3,000 or more videos up that people can find information on. There's also podcast versions of that. There's also transcripts. There's books, like I said. There's articles that have been written about the things I'm doing. We have to become more findable. Lastly, the question is, what can you bring to the table? If people were to partner with you, do you give them access to something? Do you give them ability to talk to other different people in your industry or even celebrities? Do you give them funding? Is there some sort of monetary advantage that they're able to get from it? What can you give that's a win-win? So for instance, with the verses, what we often do is one, to have the venue space so I can help people create events that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do. Two, we have the production. So for instance, we can do recordings, whether through video or audio. And we can also make that into transcripts and text. We are promoting poets on our own platform, and our platform consists of, multiple social media locations and also a newsletter. So these are all the things I'm able to offer people. And then also we have some paid opportunities as well. The next part of Key Person of Influence is going to be breaking down key areas to start building up yourself as a key person of influence. It's going to start off by talking about pitching yourself. We'll take a look at that next week.